I'm Amanda, 28, and I never thought my sister's son would be the one to ruin the proudest day of my life. Standing in my graduation gown, watching my hard-earned celebration cake splattered across my apartment floor, I froze as my 6-year-old nephew Tyler sneered, "Eat it off the ground. That's where failures like you belong." The silence in the room was deafening as my entire family witnessed this moment. What happened next changed our family forever, exposing years of hidden resentment, family secrets, and ultimately leading to the most satisfying revenge I never planned to take. Before I dive into this family drama that completely transformed my relationships, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your strength in difficult family situations. Now, let's get into how my graduation celebration turned into a family reckoning nobody saw coming. The journey to my college graduation was far from conventional. While most of my high school classmates finished their degrees in their early 20s, I was approaching 30 by the time I finally earned my business administration degree. The delay wasn't from lack of trying. My path was interrupted by family responsibilities, financial struggles, and honestly, a lack of support from those who should have been my biggest cheerleaders. My older sister Rachel, 10 years my senior at 38, had always been the golden child in our family. She married James, a successful business executive, right after getting her marketing degree from a prestigious university. Their wedding was lavish, their house in the suburbs impressive, and their son Tyler received every advantage a kid could want. Meanwhile, I worked as a waitress at a local diner while taking night classes at the community college, eventually transferring to the state university. Rachel has such a good head for business, my mother would often say during family gatherings, while my father nodded approvingly. She's really made something of herself. This was usually followed by a pointed look in my direction, with an unspoken, unlike some people, hanging in the air. The truth was that my education had been delayed because I had stepped up to help my parents during a financial crisis when my dad lost his job 8 years ago. I emptied my modest college fund to help them avoid foreclosure, with promises that they would help me later. Those promises gradually faded into vague reassurances and eventually silence whenever I brought up the subject. Rachel never had to make such sacrifices. Her college had been fully funded, her wedding paid for, and she even received a down payment for her first house as a gift from our parents. The disparity in how we were treated wasn't subtle, but whenever I tried to address it, I was labeled as jealous and ungrateful. "Your sister works very hard for what she has," my mother would say defensively. "You could have the same if you applied yourself." What my parents didn't see was how Rachel cultivated this image of perfection while undermining me at every turn. Behind her carefully crafted social media posts showing off her McMansion, luxury cars, and expensive family vacations to Aspen and the Bahamas, there was a different reality brewing. The first signs of trouble appeared in Tyler's behavior. At family gatherings, he was increasingly disrespectful, constantly on his phone, and dismissive of anyone who tried to engage with him. Rachel and James seemed oblivious, or worse, enabling. Boys will be boys. Rachel would laugh when Tyler insulted a family member or broke something valuable. "He's just going through a phase." My modest one-bedroom apartment was a far cry from Rachel's showcase home, but I had worked hard for my independence. Every shift at the diner, every late-night studying after work, every sacrifice was leading to this moment. My college graduation. After 6 years of part-time studies, I was finally going to walk across that stage and receive my diploma. The graduation cake was a splurge I normally couldn't afford. I'd saved tips for weeks to order a custom cake with my university logo and the words, "Congratulations, Amanda. You did it," written in the school colors. It represented not just the degree, but my perseverance through years of struggle, doubt, and having to prove myself worthy of the education that had come so easily to my sister. The day before my graduation, I overheard Rachel on the phone with someone, her voice low but irritated. "Yes, we have to go to Amanda's little graduation thing tomorrow," she said with a sigh. "Mom's insisting. It's just community college that she finally finished, but you know how dramatic she gets about these things." I felt my chest tighten. First, It wasn't just community college. I had transferred and was graduating from the state university. Second, the dismissive tone hurt more than I wanted to admit. But I pushed the feelings aside. This day was about me and my accomplishment, and I wasn't going to let Rachel's attitude ruin it. Little did I know that the next day would change everything. Not just the celebration, but our entire family dynamic and my understanding of what it means to truly be family. The morning of my graduation, I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. After the ceremony, I had invited my family back to my apartment for a small celebration. I had spent the previous day cleaning until the place sparkled, stringing up a congratulations graduate banner, and arranging a small buffet of finger foods that wouldn't strain my tight budget. The ceremony itself went perfectly. Walking across the stage in my cap and gown, hearing my name called, and receiving my diploma case felt surreal. Years of hard work had culminated in this moment. As I looked out into the audience, I spotted my parents smiling proudly. Even Rachel seemed genuinely happy for me, clapping alongside James while Tyler looked bored beside them. Back at my apartment, the mood was celebratory. My parents had brought champagne, my aunt and uncle had sent flowers, and several cousins had shown up with cards and small gifts. The centerpiece of the celebration was, of course, the beautiful graduation cake that had just been delivered. 3 tiers of vanilla sponge with buttercream frosting, decorated with fondant graduation caps and my university's logo. It was the most expensive cake I had ever purchased, but today was special. "Speech, speech," my uncle called out, as I prepared to cut the cake. I blushed but complied, raising my plastic champagne glass. "I just want to thank everyone for coming today and for supporting me through this journey. It wasn't always easy, but knowing I had family behind me made all the difference." As people applauded, I noticed Rachel standing in the corner with an odd expression. Was that resentment? Surely not. This was my day after all. Why would she be upset? "When do we eat the cake?" Tyler interrupted, his voice loud and impatient. He had been sulking in a corner for most of the party, glued to his phone and rolling his eyes whenever anyone tried to include him in conversation. "Right now, actually," I smiled, trying to keep the mood light. "Would you like to help me serve it?" Tyler didn't respond, just shrugged and went back to his phone. Rachel approached, putting her arm around her son. "You know, Amanda," she said, her voice carrying across the small apartment, "it's really impressive that you finally finished college. Some of us did it in 4 years while starting a family, but hey, better late than never, right?" The room grew awkwardly quiet. My aunt cleared her throat and quickly changed the subject, asking about my job prospects. As the conversation resumed, I tried to shake off Rachel's comment. I wouldn't let her passive-aggressive behavior ruin my day. "Amanda has already had several promising interviews," my father announced proudly. "One of them is for a management position at Atlantic Corp." "Really?" Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "That's where James knows people. Why didn't you ask us for connections?" "I wanted to do this on my own merit," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. And they seemed impressed with my experience and degree combination. "Well, entry-level positions are always a good start," Rachel said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Though I'm sure they're just looking for someone to answer phones and make coffee." I felt my face flush with anger, but before I could respond, my mother appeared with the cake knife. "Let's cut this beautiful cake. Amanda, you do the honors." As I took the knife and positioned it over the cake, I felt a moment of pure satisfaction. Despite everything, I had done it. I had graduated. I had persevered. That's when it happened. In what felt like slow motion, Tyler suddenly lunged forward, his shoulder bumping roughly into mine as he reached for the cake. With one swift, deliberate movement, he shoved the entire 3-tier creation off the table. The cake seemed to hang in the air for a split second before landing with a sickening splat on my clean hardwood floor. Gasps filled the room as everyone froze in shock. The beautiful cake was now a destroyed mess of frosting, sponge, and fondant decorations spread across the floor. My university logo was shattered, the congratulatory message unreadable. Before anyone could react, Tyler looked directly at me, his face twisted in a cruel smirk. "Eat it off the ground," he sneered. "That's where failures like you belong." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, still in my graduation gown, staring at the ruined symbol of my achievement. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Rachel was the first to break the silence. "Tyler!" she exclaimed. But her tone was more exasperated than angry. "That wasn't funny." Then, unbelievably, she turned to me with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's just a teenager being silly, Amanda. You know how boys are at this age. All those hormones." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister was making excuses for her son's deliberate cruelty. I looked to my parents, expecting them to say something, to stand up for me, but they just looked uncomfortable. "It's okay," my father finally said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "We can clean this up. No harm done." No harm done? I wanted to scream. This wasn't just about the cake. It was about respect, about family, about years of being treated as less than. But, as always, Rachel and her family were being given a pass. The party dispersed quickly after that. Rachel made a show of making Tyler help clean up, but he did so with visible contempt, barely picking up a few napkins before declaring he was done. My parents left with apologetic hugs that felt hollow, and soon I was alone in my apartment with the remains of my ruined celebration. I sat on my sofa, still in my graduation gown, and finally let the tears come. Years of hard work, of sacrifice, of proving myself. And this was how my family chose to mark the occasion. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my cousin Megan. I recorded what happened. "Tyler has gone too far this time. Call me when you're ready to talk." The incident with the cake wasn't an isolated event. As I sat scrolling through years of photos on my phone that night, I realized it was just the latest in a lifelong pattern of Rachel undermining me and my parents enabling her behavior. Growing up, as Rachel's younger sister, meant living in a constant shadow. When I was 7, I won a school art contest. My drawing was selected to be displayed in the town library. The morning of the ceremony, Rachel accidentally spilled orange juice all over my outfit. By the time I changed, we were so late that the ceremony was nearly over. My parents blamed me for not being careful with my clothes and making everyone rush. When I was 14, I made the cheerleading squad after weeks of practice. Rachel, then 24 and already married, told me not to get too excited. "You're only on the team because Caitlin Johnson moved away," she said during Sunday dinner. "You were their last choice." My parents said nothing, and I spent the entire season wondering if she was right. The pattern continued into my dating life. In high school, I dated Scott Miller, the captain of the debate team. We were together for 6 months, when suddenly he broke up with me. I later discovered that Rachel had run into him at the mall and told him I was seeing other guys behind his back. It wasn't true, but by the time I found out, Scott had started dating someone else. Perhaps the most significant betrayal came when it was time for me to go to college. My parents had set up college funds for both of us, and Rachel's had been used to send her to an expensive private university. When it was my turn, however, the money had mysteriously been used for other expenses. I later found out Rachel had convinced my parents to invest in her husband's business venture, which promptly failed. As I sat in my apartment the day after my ruined graduation party, my cousin Megan came over with muffins and coffee. She played the video she had recorded of Tyler pushing over the cake and Rachel's lackluster response. "I've been keeping records," Megan confessed, pulling out her phone. "Rachel has always been horrible to you, and no one ever calls her out on it." She showed me text conversations spanning years, documenting incidents at family gatherings, direct quotes from Rachel disparaging me to other family members, and the pattern of my parents' enabling behavior. "Did you know she's been telling everyone you were barely passing your classes?" Megan asked. "She told Aunt Susan you were probably going to fail out before graduation." I hadn't known, but I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was learning from Megan that several family members had started to see through Rachel's facade. Uncle Robert stopped inviting her to his poker nights because she always made everything about herself, Megan explained. And Grandma Rose has been quietly concerned about Tyler's behavior for years. She told me he reminds her of Rachel when she was his age, but worse because no one corrects him. Over the next few days, I received calls and texts from various family members who had been at the party. Most expressed sympathy but suggested I not make a big deal out of it to keep family peace. A few, however, seemed genuinely angry on my behalf. My Aunt Patricia called to tell me she had always seen how Rachel treated me. "Your sister has been jealous of you since you were born," she said, matter-of-factly. "You were always smarter, more creative. Your parents gave her more attention because she demanded it, not because she deserved it." This was revelatory to me. I had always assumed I was the problem, that if I just tried harder, achieved more, complained less, my family would treat me with the same regard they gave Rachel. A week after the incident, I met with my therapist, Dr. Hannigan. I had been seeing her on and off for years, working through my feelings of inadequacy and family issues. "What Tyler did was cruel," Dr. Hannigan said after I recounted the incident, "but it's also learned behavior. Children model what they see." She helped me recognize that Tyler's action wasn't random teenage rebellion. It was the product of years of watching his mother undermine and belittle me without consequences. "Your sister has created an environment where disrespecting you is acceptable," Dr. Hannigan explained. "And by enabling her behavior, your parents have tacitly approved it." The most painful revelation came when my young cousin Zoe, who was only 12, visited with her mother. While her mom was in the bathroom, Zoe confided in me. "Tyler told me before the party that his mom said you think he's stupid," she whispered. "He said his mom told him you don't deserve to graduate because you cheated on your exams." I was stunned. I had never said anything remotely like that. In fact, I had always gone out of my way to be kind to Tyler, buying him thoughtful birthday gifts, attending his soccer games when his own parents were too busy, and helping him with homework when he stayed with my parents. Rachel hadn't just been undermining me to my face, she had been poisoning her own son against me. The cake incident wasn't just teenage impulsiveness. It was the culmination of years of Rachel's manipulation, turning her son into a weapon to hurt me on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I realized then that this wasn't just about sibling rivalry or family dynamics. It was about systematic emotional abuse that had been normalized and excused for far too long. The morning after the graduation disaster, my phone pinged with a text from Rachel. "Sorry you got so upset about the cake thing. Tyler says he was just joking around. Hope you can get over it soon." Family is family, right? I stared at the message, feeling a familiar knot of anxiety and anger in my stomach. This was Rachel's standard approach: minimize, deflect, and then imply I was overreacting. Usually, I would swallow my feelings and respond with something placating to keep the peace. Not this time. I texted back. "What Tyler did wasn't a joke. It was deliberate and cruel, and your response made it clear that you don't respect me or my accomplishments." Rachel's reply came almost instantly. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. It was just cake." This is why people think you're so difficult to deal with. I decided a text conversation wasn't going to resolve anything, so I called her. Rachel answered with an exasperated sigh. "Look, I don't have time for this," she said before I could speak. "I have a charity lunch in an hour." "Make time," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "We need to talk about what happened." What followed was 30 minutes of Rachel talking over me, dismissing my feelings, and eventually accusing me of always trying to create drama. When I brought up how she had told Tyler I thought he was stupid, she gasped in mock outrage. "I never said that. Tyler must have misunderstood something. You're always looking for ways to make me the bad guy." When I stood my ground, insisting that her behavior and Tyler's were unacceptable, Rachel escalated. "Fine, be that way. But don't expect Mom and Dad to take your side. They're already saying you're making mountains out of molehills." Sure enough, my mother called that evening, her voice strained. "Honey, I know you're upset about the cake, but Rachel says you've been sending her angry messages all day. Did she show you these supposed messages?" I asked. "Well, no. But she was very upset. You know how sensitive your sister can be." I felt a surge of frustration. "Mom, did you see what Tyler did? Did you hear what he said to me? He's just a teenager, Amanda. Teenagers say hurtful things sometimes. You need to be the bigger person here." There it was again, the expectation that I should absorb the hurt, make excuses for bad behavior, and be the bigger person. It had been the refrain of my childhood, my adolescence, And now, my adult life. Not this time, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I've spent my whole life being the bigger person while Rachel gets away with everything. I'm done. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. My mother eventually murmured something about family harmony and hung up. Over the next few days, I discovered that Rachel had been busy doing damage control. She'd posted on social media about family drama and how some people just can't take a joke. She didn't name me, but it was obvious who she was talking about. Several family members had been roped into taking sides. My Aunt Susan called to tell me I should apologize to Rachel for causing such a fuss. My father sent a text suggesting we all move past this silly incident. But something had changed in me. The cake incident had cracked open years of suppressed resentment and pain, and I couldn't simply put the lid back on. Then came an unexpected development. Megan texted me a screenshot of Rachel's private Instagram story, where she had posted a photo of a smashed cake with the caption, "Some people can't handle setbacks. Fragility isn't a good look, sis." This public mockery of my humiliation was the final straw. I saved the screenshot, along with all the other evidence I'd been collecting. That evening, I received a surprising call from a number I didn't recognize. It was James, Rachel's husband. "Amanda, it's James. Do you have a minute to talk?" His voice sounded tired, nothing like the confident businessman who had always seemed so perfectly matched with my sister. "I saw the video of what happened at your graduation party," he said. "I wasn't there because I was supposedly at a business meeting. Truth is, Rachel told me it was just a small family thing and not important enough to change my plans." I was silent, unsure how to respond. "I want to apologize for Tyler's behavior," James continued. "And for not being there, Rachel. She hasn't been honest about a lot of things lately." We arranged to meet for coffee the next day. When I arrived at the cafe, James looked like he hadn't slept in days. Over the next hour, he revealed things that shocked me. Rachel's growing financial problems, her maxed-out credit cards, the fact that their perfect life was built on a mountain of debt. Most disturbingly, he told me that Rachel had deliberately sabotaged a job interview I'd had at his company 2 years ago. She told the HR director, "You had a drinking problem?" he said, looking genuinely ashamed. "I only found out recently." "Amanda, I'm so sorry." As I processed this information, Megan sent me another text. "You need to see these." Attached were screenshots of years of text messages she had saved, documenting Rachel's manipulations, lies, and calculated efforts to undermine me. I began to realize I had more leverage than I had ever known. The truth was finally coming to light. As my story continues, I think about all the times I felt powerless in my own family. Have you ever stood up to someone who always made you feel small? If my journey is resonating with you, hit that like button. The next part of this story shows how things started to change in ways I never expected. The coffee shop meeting with James turned out to be just the beginning of a series of revelations that would completely reshape my understanding of my sister and our family dynamics. James arrived early, already nursing what looked like his second cup of coffee, dark circles under his eyes. He looked up as I approached the table. "Thanks for meeting me, Amanda," he said, his voice lower and more serious than I'd ever heard it. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since I saw that video." Over the next hour, James shared details about his marriage that left me stunned. Rachel's carefully constructed image of success and perfection was crumbling from the inside. Their financial situation was far from the prosperity they projected. Rachel had developed expensive shopping habits that had put them deep into credit card debt. The luxury vacations she posts about? "We can barely afford them, but she insists on maintaining appearances," James explained. "The Mercedes she drives? We're 3 months behind on payments. I've been working overtime just to keep up with the minimum payments on our credit cards." But the financial issues were just the surface problems. James revealed that Tyler had been having serious behavioral problems at school. He'd been suspended twice in the past year for bullying younger students, something Rachel had hidden from the family by claiming he was home with mono and then a sports injury. "She refuses to acknowledge there's a problem," James said, running a hand through his hair. "She tells the school administrators they're targeting Tyler unfairly. Meanwhile, his grades are tanking, and he's hanging out with kids who are getting into real trouble." The most painful revelation for me personally was learning that 2 years ago, when I had interviewed for a marketing position at the company where James worked, Rachel had deliberately sabotaged my chances. She told the HR director that you had a drinking problem and couldn't be trusted in a professional environment, James admitted, unable to meet my eyes. I only found out last month when the director mentioned it casually, assuming I knew. Amanda, I swear I had no idea she'd done that. I sat in silence, processing this information. The job would have been perfect for me, offering better pay and benefits than the waitressing gigs I'd been cobbling together while finishing school. It would have eased my financial struggles significantly. Why would she do that? I finally asked, though I already suspected the answer. She was threatened by you, James said simply. She always has been. You've worked so hard for everything you've achieved. Rachel. She's had a lot handed to her, and deep down, I think she knows it. As I was trying to absorb these revelations, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Megan. Call me when you're done with James. I've found something you need to see. Megan had been doing some investigating of her own. When I met her later that day, she showed me years of saved text messages, social media posts, and emails documenting Rachel's systematic campaign to undermine me to family members, friends, and even potential employers. She told Aunt Patricia that you were jealous of her marriage and trying to flirt with James, Megan said, showing me the texts. And she told Uncle Robert that you were asking family members for loans that you never intended to repay. None of it was true. I had been careful about my finances despite my struggles, never borrowing money I couldn't pay back. And the idea of flirting with James was absurd and offensive. The most disturbing discovery came when Megan showed me a text exchange between Rachel and Tyler from the day before my graduation party. Rachel had actually encouraged Tyler to put Amanda in her place if she acts all superior about her degree. Tyler had replied, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure nobody thinks she's special." Rachel's response, "That's my boy. Just make it look spontaneous." I felt physically ill reading the exchange. My own sister had deliberately orchestrated the humiliation of my graduation celebration. It hadn't been teenage impulsiveness or a momentary lapse in judgment. It had been planned. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Hernandez, Tyler's school counselor. She had gotten my number from James, who had finally started taking an active role in addressing Tyler's behavioral issues. "I've been concerned about Tyler for some time," Mrs. Hernandez explained. "He displays classic signs of a child who's been taught that cruelty is acceptable. When I've tried to discuss this with his mother, she becomes defensive and dismissive." Mrs. Hernandez described multiple incidents of bullying, including Tyler recording himself humiliating younger students and posting the videos online. The behavior pattern matched exactly what he had done to me with the cake. Deliberate cruelty followed by smug satisfaction at the target's distress. "I understand you're his aunt," Mrs. Hernandez continued. "I reached out because Tyler occasionally mentions you in a more positive light than other family members. He once said you were the only one who helped him with a science project when he was younger. I remembered that project, a solar system model I had helped Tyler build when he was 10. Rachel and James had been away on a weekend getaway, leaving Tyler with my parents, who weren't much help with school projects. I had spent hours helping him, and he had seemed genuinely appreciative. There's still hope for Tyler," Mrs. Hernandez said, "but he needs consistent boundaries and consequences, something I'm not seeing from his mother." As these revelations accumulated, other family members began reaching out to me. My Aunt Patricia called to apologize for initially taking Rachel's side. "Your sister has been spreading stories about you for years," she admitted. "I'm ashamed to say I believed some of them. But after seeing how she reacted to what Tyler did, I started questioning everything she's told me. Even my usually oblivious father called, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your cousin Megan showed me some things," he said. "About Rachel. About how she's been treating you. I didn't know." The most shocking revelation came when I visited my grandmother, who had been unable to attend my graduation due to her health. As we sat in her living room drinking tea, she revealed something that made the pieces finally fall into place. "Your sister has been using my name to open credit cards," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she handed me a stack of statements. "I only found out when a collection agency called. There's over $30,000 of debt here that I never authorized. Identity theft. My sister had stooped to defrauding our 8-year-old grandmother. As I drove home from my grandmother's house, my phone rang. It was Megan again. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice vibrating with disbelief. "I found text messages proving Rachel and Tyler planned the cake incident. She actually told him to do it, Amanda. She orchestrated the whole thing to humiliate you on your graduation day." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just family dysfunction or sibling rivalry. This was calculated malice from my own sister. I pulled over to the side of the road, unexpected tears blurring my vision. All these years, I had made excuses for Rachel's behavior, blamed myself, tried to be the bigger person. I had never wanted to believe my own sister could be so deliberately cruel. But now, with the evidence mounting, I couldn't deny it any longer. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with all the revelations of the past few days, trying to process the scope of Rachel's deception and cruelty. By morning, I was exhausted but clear-headed. I needed advice from someone objective, someone who wouldn't be swayed by family loyalty. I called Dr. Hannigan, my therapist, and she agreed to see me for an emergency session that afternoon. "What you're describing goes beyond typical sibling rivalry," she said after I had shared the recent discoveries. "Your sister has engaged in a pattern of deliberate sabotage and emotional abuse, and now she's modeling that behavior for her son." "What should I do?" I asked. Part of me wants to expose everything, make her face consequences for once in her life. But another part is still hoping to salvage some kind of relationship with your family. Dr. Hannigan finished for me. "That's natural. But, Amanda, healthy boundaries are essential here. You need to prioritize your own well-being." We talked through various options. Dr. Hannigan cautioned against making decisions based purely on anger or a desire for revenge. "The best response isn't about getting back at Rachel," she advised. "It's about establishing your worth and refusing to be a victim any longer." After our session, I felt more centered. I wasn't going to let rage guide my actions, but I also wasn't going to continue being Rachel's punching bag. I decided to start with my parents. I invited them to dinner at a quiet restaurant where we could talk privately. To my surprise, they agreed immediately. My father looked uncomfortable from the moment they sat down, avoiding my eyes. My mother attempted small talk, asking about my job search and apartment, until I gently but firmly redirected the conversation. "I need to talk to you about Rachel," I said. "There are things you don't know." Over the next hour, I methodically laid out everything I had discovered. The financial manipulation, the lies about me to family members, the deliberate sabotage of my job prospects, and finally, the text evidence that she had orchestrated the cake incident with Tyler. My mother's face grew paler with each revelation, while my father's expressions shifted from disbelief to shock to something resembling shame. "This can't be true," my mother whispered, but her protest lacked conviction. In response, I simply showed them the evidence. Screenshots, text messages, emails, all meticulously organized. It was impossible to deny. "There's more," I said quietly. "She's been committing identity theft against Grandma Rose." That was the breaking point. My father, who rarely showed strong emotion, slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "Enough," he said, his voice shaking. "This has to stop." For the first time in my life, I saw my parents truly confront the reality of who Rachel was and what they had enabled through years of looking the other way. "We need to have a family meeting," my father decided. "All of us, including James and Tyler. This has gone too far." The family meeting was set for the following Sunday at my parents' house. Rachel was told only that there were important family matters to discuss. I spent the intervening days in a state of nervous anticipation, wondering how Rachel would react when confronted with everything at once. When Sunday arrived, I drove to my parents' house with a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened today, things would change. The family secrets were coming out, and Rachel would no longer be able to manipulate everyone from the shadows. Rachel and James arrived separately, a detail that didn't escape anyone's notice. Tyler slouched in behind his father, immediately pulling out his phone until James firmly took it from him. My mother had prepared coffee and pastries, a normal Sunday family ritual that felt surreally out of place given what was about to happen. We gathered awkwardly in the living room, the tension palpable. My father cleared his throat. "We've asked you all here because there are some serious issues that need to be addressed." Rachel immediately adopted her usual defensive posture, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "What is this? An intervention? If it's about Tyler's behavior at Amanda's little party, we've already apologized for that. This is about much more than the cake incident," my father said, his voice firmer than I'd ever heard it. "This is about a pattern of behavior that has been going on for years. One by one, the revelations came out. The identity theft against our grandmother, the sabotage of my job prospects, the lies to family members, the orchestration of the cake incident, and finally, the concerning pattern of behavior Rachel was instilling in Tyler." As the evidence mounted, Rachel's face went through a series of transformations, from indignant denial to panic, to a kind of feral desperation. She attempted to interrupt, to deflect, to turn the blame back on me, but for once, no one was buying it. When James confirmed the financial deceptions and showed text messages proving Rachel had encouraged Tyler's behavior, she broke down. "You're all against me," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You've always loved Amanda more. Perfect little Amanda who never does anything wrong." It was a stunning reversal of the family dynamic I had experienced my entire life, and it left me speechless. In Rachel's distorted reality, I had been the favored child all along, despite all evidence to the contrary. The most surprising moment came from Tyler. As his mother dissolved into hysterical accusations, he sat there looking increasingly uncomfortable. When Rachel attempted to draw him into her narrative, "Tell them how Amanda always treats you like you're stupid," he unexpectedly straightened up. "That's not true, Mom," he said quietly. "Aunt Amanda always helps me with homework when you and Dad are too busy. She's the only one who came to my science fair last year." Rachel's face contorted with rage and betrayal. "How dare you take her side?" James stood up then, his face set in grim determination. "That's enough, Rachel. This isn't about sides. This is about truth and consequences." He turned to face her directly. "I've contacted a lawyer. I'm filing for separation. And I'm seeking primary custody of Tyler." The room fell silent except for Rachel's ragged breathing. No one had expected this development. "You can't do that," she whispered. "I can, and I am," James replied. "Tyler needs stability and better guidance. And you need help, Rachel. Professional help." Throughout this confrontation, I remained surprisingly calm. The vindication I might have expected to feel was tempered by genuine sadness for the broken relationships in front of me. This wasn't the revenge I had fantasized about in my darkest moments. This was a family in crisis finally facing hard truths. When Rachel turned to me, her mascara streaking down her face, and spat, "Are you happy now? You've destroyed my family." I didn't respond with anger. "This isn't what I wanted, Rachel," I said honestly. "I never wanted to hurt you or break apart your family. I just couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it wasn't." As the meeting continued, boundaries were established. My parents made it clear that Rachel would need to make amends and seek therapy if she wanted to remain part of family gatherings. James outlined his conditions for potentially working on their marriage. And I stated, clearly and calmly, that I would no longer accept disrespect or manipulation. When we finally dispersed, exhausted from the emotional confrontation, Tyler approached me awkwardly in the hallway. "I'm sorry about your cake," he mumbled, unable to meet my eyes. "Mom said it would be funny, but it wasn't." It was a small moment, but it felt like the first honest interaction we'd had in years. "Thank you for saying that, Tyler," I replied. "That means a lot to me." As I drove home that evening, I realized that the day's events hadn't been about revenge at all. They had been about truth, accountability, and the possibility, however fragile, of healing. The weeks following the family confrontation were both difficult and transformative. The immediate aftermath felt like the calm after a violent storm. Quiet, but with evidence of destruction all around us. Rachel initially retreated into angry isolation, refusing to speak to any of us. James moved out of their house and into a small apartment, taking Tyler with him during the week. My parents, still processing their own role in enabling Rachel's behavior for decades, seemed to age overnight. Their shoulders stooped with the weight of regret. But gradually, real changes began to take shape. 2 weeks after the confrontation, my mother called to tell me that Rachel had agreed to attend therapy. The threat of losing custody of Tyler seems to have gotten through to her, she explained. James won't consider reconciliation unless she gets professional help. Rachel's financial issues couldn't be solved so easily. The credit card fraud against our grandmother had legal consequences. Grandma Rose had initially been reluctant to press charges against her own granddaughter, but the extent of the deception, over $30,000 across multiple fraudulent accounts, was too serious to ignore. In the end, Rachel avoided criminal charges only by agreeing to a strict repayment plan, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. The family secret was now part of legal record, impossible to deny or minimize. Tyler's situation saw the most immediate positive change. James enrolled him in a specialized behavioral program that met 3 times a week after school. The program focused on empathy development, anger management, and accountability. He hated it at first, James told me over coffee one afternoon, but I think he's starting to understand that his actions have consequences. The counselors are helping him see how his behavior affects others. My own life was changing too. Without Rachel's interference, my job prospects suddenly improved. A marketing firm that had previously rejected my application contacted me for a second interview. The hiring manager mentioned offhandedly that they'd received conflicting references about me previously but had recently heard good things from a mutual connection. I was offered the position with a salary that, while modest by some standards, felt like untold riches compared to my waitressing income. For the first time, I could afford a nicer apartment and start paying down my student loans without constant financial anxiety. 3 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected letter from Tyler's counselor at the behavioral program. She explained that part of Tyler's therapy involved making amends to people he had hurt, and he had identified me as someone he needed to apologize to properly. Tyler has expressed genuine remorse for his actions at your graduation celebration, she wrote. If you're open to it, we believe a facilitated conversation could be beneficial for his progress and potentially healing for you as well. I was hesitant. The cake incident still stung, especially knowing it had been orchestrated by Rachel, but after discussing it with Dr. Hannigan, I agreed to meet with Tyler and his counselor. The meeting was awkward at first. Tyler sat stiffly in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. But with gentle prompting from his counselor, he delivered an apology that seemed genuinely heartfelt. "What I did with your cake was cruel," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I knew it would hurt you, and I did it anyway. I was trying to impress my mom, but that's not an excuse. I'm really sorry, Aunt Amanda." I was touched by his sincerity. "Thank you, Tyler. That means a lot to me. The counselors here have been helping me understand why I act like I do sometimes," he continued. "They say I've been modeling my mom's behavior. I didn't really get what that meant at first, but now I think I do." We talked for almost an hour, and I saw glimpses of the sweet boy Tyler had been before adolescence, and Rachel's influence had hardened him. He shared his struggles at school, his embarrassment over his parents' separation, and his fear that he might be messed up forever. "You're not messed up forever," I assured him. "You're making better choices now. That's what matters." As I was leaving, Tyler asked hesitantly if I might be willing to help him with an upcoming science project. "Dad tries, but he's not good at explaining things. You always made stuff make sense." It was a small moment of connection, but it felt significant. Around the same time, James reached out to me with a job lead. A former colleague of his had started a digital marketing agency and was looking for someone with fresh ideas and a strong work ethic. "I mentioned you, and she'd like to meet," he said. "No pressure, but I thought you might be interested." The interview went well, and I was offered a position with better pay and more creative responsibility than my current job. I accepted, feeling both excited and slightly overwhelmed by how quickly things were changing. Rachel's journey was slower and more complicated. She attended therapy sessions as required, but, according to my parents, was still struggling to take full responsibility for her actions. "She's making progress," my father said cautiously. "But it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back." The most surprising change came from my parents. After decades of enabling Rachel's behavior and diminishing my achievements, they seemed determined to make amends. My mother called regularly just to check in. My father sent encouraging texts about my new job, and they both made visible efforts to treat me with the respect I'd always craved. 5 months after the confrontation, my mother organized a small gathering to belatedly celebrate my graduation. "It's not much," she said apologetically, "but we want to properly acknowledge your achievement." The celebration was modest but heartfelt. My parents, James, Tyler, a few cousins including Megan, and my grandmother Rose attended. Rachel was conspicuously absent. By mutual agreement, she wasn't ready to participate in family gatherings yet without creating tension. My mother had ordered a cake similar to the original one that had been destroyed, complete with my university logo and congratulatory message. When it came time to cut it, Tyler stepped forward. "Can I help?" he asked tentatively. Together, we cut the cake and served slices to everyone. It was a symbolic moment, not erasing what had happened, but creating a new memory to stand alongside the painful one. Later that evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was from Tyler's counselor. "Tyler wanted me to tell you that today meant a lot to him. He says thank you for giving him a second chance." As months passed, our family continued its slow healing process. Rachel eventually completed her mandated therapy program and financial counseling. She and James remained separated but were attempting co-parenting counseling for Tyler's sake. I had moved into a nicer apartment, was excelling at my new job, and had even started dating someone I met through a work conference. The most meaningful change, however, was internal. The constant feeling of inadequacy that had shadowed me for most of my life was gradually fading. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth to my family or seek their validation for my choices. 6 months after starting at the digital marketing agency, I was assigned to lead a major campaign for a new client. As I presented my ideas to the team and received enthusiastic feedback, I realized how much my confidence had grown. Without Rachel's constant undermining and my parents' subtle dismissal, I was flourishing professionally and personally. That evening, as I was preparing for a second meeting with the client, I received a text from James with a photo attached. It showed Tyler proudly holding up a science test with an A grade circled at the top. The message read, "He wanted me to send this to you. Says he couldn't have done it without your help. Thank you for being there for him despite everything." I felt a rush of emotion, pride in Tyler's achievement, gratitude for the relationship we were rebuilding, and a bittersweet acknowledgement of how much had changed in less than a year. The road ahead would still have complications. Rachel was slowly working her way back into family gatherings under strict behavioral expectations. Tyler was making progress but still had occasional setbacks. My parents were trying to balance supporting both their daughters without falling back into old patterns. But for the first time, I felt like an equal member of my family, not an afterthought or a second-best alternative to Rachel. My achievements were acknowledged, my boundaries respected, and my voice heard. As my new marketing campaign launched to positive client feedback, I received another unexpected message. This one was from Rachel, our first direct communication in months that wasn't mediated through family or therapists. "Heard about your campaign success from Dad," she wrote. "Congratulations, I mean that." It was a small gesture, but from Rachel it represented significant progress. Perhaps someday we might find our way to a healthier sibling relationship. For now, though, I was content with the distance and the boundaries that had allowed me to finally thrive. The graduation cake incident had been painful and humiliating in the moment, but in retrospect, it had been the catalyst for changes that were long overdue. Not just for me, but for our entire family. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, carefully hanging my framed diploma on the wall. The sleek, modern space was a far cry from the cramped one-bedroom where my graduation celebration had gone so wrong a year ago. My promotion at the digital marketing agency had come with a significant raise, allowing me to finally live comfortably while still paying down my student loans. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Dinner still on for 7 p.m.? Your father is making his famous lasagna." I smiled and replied with a confirmation. Family dinners had become a monthly tradition, carefully orchestrated to minimize conflict while rebuilding relationships. Tonight would be the first one with all of us present, including Rachel. The past 6 months had brought gradual but significant changes to our family dynamic. After completing her court-mandated therapy program, Rachel had continued with private sessions. According to my parents, she was genuinely trying to understand her behavior patterns and make changes. James and Rachel remained separated, though they had progressed from tense co-parenting to something resembling a civil friendship. James had moved from his temporary apartment into a house closer to Tyler's school, where Tyler lived with him during the week. Tyler spent weekends with Rachel in what had once been their family home, now significantly downsized after they were forced to sell the McMansion to address Rachel's debt issues. The behavioral program had made a remarkable difference in Tyler's attitude and actions. His grades had improved, and the school counselor reported no further bullying incidents. My relationship with Tyler had evolved in ways I never expected. After I helped him with that science project, he began reaching out regularly for homework, help, or just to share things that interested him. Last month, he had asked if I would attend his science fair, where his project on renewable energy earned an honorable mention. "You were the only one who believed I could do something like this," he told me afterward, his voice wavering with emotion. "I always knew you were capable of great things, Tyler," I replied honestly. "You just needed to believe it too." As for Rachel and me, we were taking small, careful steps towards some new version of a sibling relationship. Our interactions were still somewhat formal and guarded, but no longer hostile. At my parents' insistence, we had attended a few family therapy sessions together, which had been difficult but productive. During one particularly intense session, Rachel had finally acknowledged the jealousy that had driven much of her behavior toward me. "You always made everything look so easy," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "School, friends, everything. I felt like I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition." It was a stunning reversal of how I had perceived our childhood. I had always felt like the less favored, less successful sister. Learning that Rachel had harbored similar insecurities helped me see our relationship from a new perspective. "I never knew you felt that way," I told her. "I always thought Mom and Dad favored you. They gave me more things," Rachel acknowledged. "But I think that was because I demanded it. You were always so self-sufficient, so capable. I felt like I needed to be louder, more demanding, to get their attention." These revelations didn't erase the years of hurt or excuse Rachel's manipulative behavior, but they did help me understand it better. And understanding, while not the same as forgiveness, was a step in that direction. My parents had undergone their own transformation. After decades of enabling Rachel and diminishing my achievements, they were making visible efforts to treat us both with equal respect and support. My mother had started a journal where she documented positive interactions with each of us, a technique suggested by their family therapist to help her recognize and correct her tendency to favor Rachel. My father, who had always been more emotionally distant, had begun sending me thoughtful texts about my work achievements or simply to check in. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. As I arrived at my parents' house for dinner that evening, I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. This would be our first attempt at a normal family dinner with everyone present. Despite all the progress we'd made, old patterns had a way of reasserting themselves in familiar settings. James arrived first with Tyler, who immediately showed me his latest science test grade. Rachel arrived last, carrying a homemade apple pie, my favorite, though I couldn't remember ever telling her that. "Tyler mentioned it was your favorite," she explained awkwardly when I thanked her. "I thought I'd try making one." Dinner was not without its tense moments. Rachel grew quiet when my parents asked about my recent work promotion. Tyler became sullen when James mentioned an upcoming parent-teacher conference. But overall, it was more comfortable than I had expected. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for coffee and Rachel's apple pie, my mother suddenly disappeared into her bedroom. She returned holding a wrapped package. "This is long overdue," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a beautifully framed family photo from my graduation day, taken before the cake incident with all of us smiling proudly. Along the bottom of the frame was an engraved plate that read, "Amanda's graduation, a day of pride." "We should have celebrated your achievement properly," my father said, his voice gruff with emotion. "We're sorry it took us so long to recognize how special it was." I felt tears prick at my eyes as I thanked them. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Rachel watching, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Later, as I was helping clear the dessert plates, Rachel approached me in the kitchen. "The pie wasn't very good, was it?" she asked, a hint of her old defensiveness in her voice. I considered sugarcoating my response, but decided honesty was more important in our new relationship. The filling was delicious. The crust was a little tough. To my surprise, Rachel laughed. "I know. I followed Mom's recipe, but I think I overworked the dough. I'll do better next time." Next time. The casual implication that there would be more family dinners, more attempts at normal interactions, hung between us. "I'd like that," I said simply. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The cake incident, painful as it had been, had cracked open decades of family dysfunction, forcing us all to confront patterns that had been hurting us for years. The next morning, I received an email from Tyler's school counselor, Miss Hernandez. She wanted to let me know that Tyler had volunteered to mentor a younger student who was struggling with math, the same subject I had helped Tyler improve in. He specifically mentioned wanting to help others the way his aunt helped him, she wrote. "I thought you'd like to know the positive impact you're having." I sat at my desk, reading and rereading the email. The cycle of family dysfunction that had threatened to continue into the next generation was being broken, one small choice at a time. That weekend, I met James for our now regular coffee catch-up. What had begun as discussions about Tyler had evolved into a genuine friendship. He updated me on the latest developments with Rachel. She was interviewing for a part-time job at a local boutique, her first attempt at employment in years. "It's a small step, but an important one," he said. Her therapist thinks having her own source of income will help with her sense of independence and self-worth. "Do you think you two will ever reconcile?" I asked, curious but cautious. James considered the question carefully. "I don't know. There's been a lot of damage, and trust is hard to rebuild. But we're better co-parents now than we were spouses for the last few years. For Tyler's sake, that's what matters most." As winter turned to spring, our family continued its careful healing process. Rachel and I had begun meeting occasionally for coffee, brief, sometimes awkward encounters that nevertheless represented progress. During one such meeting, she mentioned that she had been going through old family photos. "I found this," she said, sliding a faded photograph across the table. It showed the two of us as children, maybe 6 and 16, building a snowman together. We were both laughing, my small mittened hand clasped in her larger one as we positioned a carrot nose. "I'd forgotten we used to have fun together," Rachel said softly. "Before everything got so competitive." "Me too," I admitted. That photo now sits on my desk at work. Not to erase the painful history between us, but to remind me that relationships can change, evolve, and sometimes even heal. A year to the day after the cake incident, I received a text message from Tyler asking if he could come over that weekend. He had something he wanted to show me. When he arrived, he was carrying a small bakery box. Inside was a cupcake with my university's logo carefully piped in frosting on top. "I took a cake decorating workshop," he explained, looking both proud and slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to make something to replace what I ruined." The gesture brought tears to my eyes. "It's beautiful, Tyler. Thank you." We sat at my kitchen table, sharing the cupcake and talking about his upcoming high school science competition. As he enthusiastically described his project, I marveled at the transformation in this once sullen teenager who had deliberately hurt me a year ago. People often talk about family as though it's a fixed, unchangeable entity. You're stuck with what you get. But my experience had taught me that family relationships can be remade, rebuilt, and sometimes even strengthened through crisis. The revenge I had initially craved after the cake incident would have given me momentary satisfaction but ultimately continued the cycle of hurt. Instead, by standing firm in my worth and insisting on truth and accountability, I had helped create the possibility of something better, not just for me, but for all of us. As I think back on this journey of family healing and personal growth, I wonder if any of you have experienced similar transformations in your own families. Has standing your ground ever led to unexpected positive changes in difficult relationships? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this account of family karma and redemption resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be struggling with family dynamics of their own. Remember that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't getting even meaner. It's getting better and breaking cycles that have hurt for generations. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope my story has given you some hope or insight for your own family challenges.